the new independent MP for North Sydney, has warned Anthony Albanese that Labor could face a similar Teal tidal wave against his government if it ignores local communities. Kylea Tink won the blue ribbon electorate amid a 12% swing away from Liberal Trent Zimmerman. Speaking for the first time since declaring victory, Ms Tink said she believed the Climate 200-backed independents would have a long-term political presence.
People like myself stood up in seats like this because there was a government that wasn't listening to this community. My kind of perspective on that is it's really important that whatever government comes into place after this election hears that. You know, and if this new government doesn't listen to their communities that it's there to represent, we will see a similar result in 3 years' time.
And Kylea Tink has been good enough to join us now. Thank you very much for your time and congratulations, first of all. Your election, being elected, it obviously was part of this surge for independence, and it was also a big surge away from Scott Morrison. To how much do you put down your election to his pretty deep unpopularity?
Tom, you know, I think there were so many elements that came together around this election, but actually the most important of them was a deep sense of dissatisfaction with the two-party system here in North Sydney and the fact that, you know, our community, the things that were so important to our community, so faster action on climate, integrity in federal politics, looking at how our economy is geared and addressing systemic inequality simply weren't being raised as priority issues by either of the major parties. To your point, there's no doubt the Prime Minister was unpopular here in North Sydney, and I think that the reason that was the case is that we had a moderate member who everybody genuinely liked, but when you looked at his voting record, it was consistently, his votes were consistently cast in the same way as Barnaby Joyce. So it was actually, from my perspective, it was a dissatisfaction with that party structure and people really wanting to see politics come back to a point where it's about the people and not the party.
It's interesting because I know that there's been a lot of mention of where people in these seats, including Trent Zimmerman, voted, and they voted with Barnaby Joyce. But it's what happens behind the scenes and in party room meetings that change things. There was never a vote on net zero. Barnaby Joyce didn't want it to happen, but people like Trent Zimmerman made it happen. Do you concede they were getting concessions from people like Barnaby Joyce?
Well, you know, I think what's really difficult in that scenario is that we don't know what concessions they were able to gain because we were never privy to those conversations. You know, effectively, I believe really strongly, and I think the people of North Sydney believe really strongly, that good government is transparent and accountable and actually ensures that people know what conversations are happening when. And, you know, we have a verbal commitment to net zero by 2050. It's not legislated. We don't have a structure around it to achieve that yet. And so I think that what we had was a party system that was asking people to trust it, but what people really want to see is actually what's going on inside of government, and that's where independents can provide that transparency.
So does that mean, it doesn't look like it would happen in this parliament, but you never know, it could. If your vote is ever needed to get something over the line and you have a deal with the government of the day, you will announce on the day you're doing that what you're getting in exchange?
Well, I can't imagine. You know, I've never been a politician, so I have to own that. What I have been is very successful in business and community engagement and community campaigns. And so to me, transparency is really important. So I can't foresee a circumstance where I wouldn't be transparent around what the discussions are that are underway. And I would hope that that's actually the sort of government that we're walking into now with the rise of so many independents across the country. I think it's what Australians want to see, Tom. They actually want this two-party, gridlocked, you know, you win, they lose kind of mentality around politics to be released, to be let go, and for us to actually do what comes naturally to us as Australians, which is collaborate and lean in and get really good outcomes for everybody.
Right. I mean, so I know that you talk about transparency, you say what Australians want. I know some of them love straight answers, so you say you couldn't see a situation in which you wouldn't be transparent. Can you just be emphatic and say if you're going to do a deal one day to vote for something and get something in exchange, you'll reveal what the deal is?
Yeah, you know what? Let's say that, because I don't know how to do business any other way, to tell you the truth. So I'm very happy to say the people of North Sydney have been really clear with me on what they want from me. So, you know, that's the sort of member I will be for North Sydney.
All right, there you go. So we know climate a big issue for you. We know national integrity as well. It looks like Labor will do what the Teal independents, so-called Teal independents, want. But on climate, Labor has its policy. It will be significantly higher emissions reduction compared to the government. So they were 26 to 28, Labor's 43, with an ability to go higher depending on what they achieve. But that's where they're at. So what are you going to do for 3 years on that issue? Just continually call for Labor to go higher, and if that falls on deaf ears, then what?
Look, I'm really hopeful that what we're going to find with this government is that actually we have a government that is open to discussion and consensus building across the House. With myself joining a number of other people on the crossbench, the reality is our voice will be consistent and it will be heard. And so I think it would reflect badly on the government if they weren't prepared to consult and engage more broadly in Parliament. This whole push is about empowering the parliamentary process and making sure the House of Representatives is exactly that, a House of Representatives for all communities. So yeah, I can guarantee that if there's no movement from the government side, I'm certainly not going to sit down and stay quiet. And I really am hopeful that we are about to step into a new era of politics, which we've already heard our incoming Prime Minister say. He wants to do politics positively. He wants to do it in a way that is constructive and forward-focused. So, you know, at this point, I'm taking him on face value, and I'm really looking forward to being part of those solutions in the longer term.
And when you talk about whether or not you'll be, continuing to push for change, are you open to a policy that maybe tips more money into one particular area, provides subsidies, whatever it might be, rather than just changing that headline number of emissions reduction? Or do you want that headline number changed regardless? Is that the fundamental for you?
What I want is for climate action in this country to be depoliticised. And I think that's what we've heard and we've seen in this election outcome. People want to know that regardless of who is in power, there's a framework that is consistent and guaranteed that is ensuring that our country is moving forward, not just because it's the right thing to do environmentally, but because it's the best thing to do for our economy. You know, there's been lots of time given to the fact that Australia is only a small contributor to global emissions. That might be the case, but the reality is we can be a huge contributor to global solutions, and that's what I'll be advocating the entire way through.
Does it all come down to that number, though, still for you, or are you open to if Labor says, look, we can't shift that, that's our promise we took to an election? And I know the Teals have done well, but Labor's still got many more people around the country that have voted for it. So that's its pledge, and it might be able to offer other incentives on climate, but not that headline emissions reduction target.
We have to do everything that we can possibly do to get to net zero as quickly as we can. And fundamentally, we need to keep our global warming down between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius. So as North Sydney's member, I'll be doing everything I can to exert pressure around achieving those outcomes. And as I said, I think that fundamentally involves depoliticising our whole approach to climate action in this country and moving forward in a longer term approach. It's where Zali Steggall's climate bills are so strong. You know, that does look at 5-year carbon budgets that are reviewed to make sure we are moving forward as quickly as possible. I'm eager to understand how this government sees its plan working, and obviously very open to discussions, but it has to be something that is sustainable, maintainable, and gets us there as quickly as we can.
But in terms of depoliticising, doesn't it matter as well for all those Labor people or people that voted Labor and perhaps didn't want them to go further on climate at the moment with their concern for the economy? Labor has to weigh that up as well, don't they?
Labor went to our entire country with a very clear policy. I mean, that's undoubtable, Tom. And I think that it is important that we respect those seats that have returned Labor members to Parliament. The reality is, though, we have to respect those seats that didn't return a Labor member to Parliament and open up a conversation on both sides. I've said all along, I'm really hoping this is a new era in Australian politics and we return to true representation and true consensus building in Canberra.
Got to leave it there. Kylea, Tink, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tom.